Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, with our main topic today. Well, we are going to talk now about the recent visit by a German and Austrian tourist delegation to the Governorate of Minya in Upper Egypt. The delegation have visited the historic sites in the Governorate, including the monuments of Bani Hassan and also Tuna al-Jabal. We are going to shed light on this, so we have the pleasure to host this morning in the breakfast show our dear guest, Mr. Sayed Ali Taha, historian and researcher. Good morning, Mr. Taha.
Good morning.
Well, Mr. Taha, how do you see the importance of this delegation, the Austrian and the German delegation visiting the historical sites in Minya Governorate?
Of course, Minya, very fashionable and very known between the German people especially. The first discoveries and the first excavation had done there was a German mission. And that can tell you why the famous bust of Nefertiti, the one with the blue hat nowadays in Berlin Museum. That was found by one of the famous archaeologists. He's a German archaeologist, and he found two. One unfinished, nowadays we have it in the Egyptian Museum, and the other one with the blue hat or the blue crown. Nowadays you can see it in the German or Berlin Museum in Germany. We used to have what we call it super long cruise, starting from Maadi, Cairo, up to Aswan. About 12 nights, the tourists stay in a boat, and this boat taking him in a cruise up to Aswan, and with different stops through the cruise. He can stop in Minya, and they stop for 2 nights in Minya, by the way, because there are a lot of antiquities and a lot of historical sites in Minya. 1 day is not enough, so you need to pass there at least 2 days to cover the whole historical sites in Minya. Minya is very, very important as Luxor, as Saqqara, as pyramids area, and played a role in the history during what we call it the first intermediate period. That's somehow 2100 BCE up to something like 1700 BCE. That's very, very important when we talk about Minya, because it's very important, especially Amarna. Amarna is a historical site there in Minya related with Akhenaten. Akhenaten, or Akh-en-Eten, as we call him in the ancient Egyptian language. He was the one who called for a new religion, and they changed and reformed everything during the 18th dynasty.
Yes, and what's the importance of Amarna? Of course, it's it's very important.
It's something we call it in the cult or the religion monotheism. Akhenaten called for one God. Before him and after him, actually, a lot of deities, a lot of gods known in Egypt, and the common one was known in ancient Egyptian time during the 18th dynasty was Amen Ra, or as we call him, Amun Ra. Even the name of Akhenaten himself, he was born with the name of Amenemhotep, that we call it in Greek language, Amenophis. And his father was called Amenhotep as well. That's why his father is called Amenhotep III, and him, Akhenaten, was called at the beginning as Amenhotep IV, and then it changed his name from Amenophis or Amenhotep into Akhenaten, or Akh-en-Eten, the one who devoted himself to Eten, the new cult. The new cult of Akhenaten was just a solar disk, and from this solar disk the rays goes down as human hands, ending with the key of life next to the Ankh sign, next to the nose of the king and the Queen Nefertiti as well. That's why Amarna is so important, because you can compare what was done by Akhenaten as a reformation, political and religious reformation, was what was done by Martin Luther in Europe in Middle Ages. Exactly, was a kind of reformation and a kind of a changing against the priesthood and their influence and their control in policy. It seems like the king was like a kind of puppet or a marionette in the hand of the high priests, and they could do whatever they want without consultation and without with the king. So Akhenaten wanted to do a kind of limit and wanted to control that powerful, priesthood. That's why he changed the religion. But this reformation was done by him, goes to the art itself and to the architecture. Before Akhenaten, we used to have, a kind of the temple, like in Karnak or Luxor temple in Luxor city, a facade or what we call it pylon, and then an open court, and then hypostyle hall or
Yes.
coronado hall, and so on. The temple was invented by Akhenaten for the new cult, with just an open court. In the middle of this court was an altar or offering table, and Akhenaten was standing there. So if I go, if I want to do some prayers or some offerings, I place it to Akhenaten first, and then Akhenaten place it to God or the new cult Aten. Actually, Akhenaten wrote a poem in the honor of his new cult or new god, Aten. This poem is very, very similar to David's Psalms, especially Psalm number 104. Actually, it looks like copied one from the other verses and the phrases looks like exactly and the same grammatical structure and the same words as if you compare it with what was written by Akhenaten to his god.
Yes.
Amarna also very important because we have 39 tombs. These 39 tombs dedicated to the high officials or the high dignitaries that been working with Akhenaten. Some of those high dignitaries, they have two tombs. One in Luxor, for example, Ramusa. Ramusa was a minister at the time of Amenophes III, so Akhenaten's father. So he prepared a tomb in Luxor or Thebes.
We have
and then he
now
moved,
photos
he moved
for
this
the site.
from Amarna city.
Yes.
And these are the ruins of the the royal palace in Amarna. And also he Ramusa he prepared a tomb in Luxor and another one in Amarna or Minya. So that gives us an indication that they started their work in Luxor, and then when Akhenaten moved the capital from Luxor to Amarna, they moved with him. Of course, we don't know exactly what had passed to Akhenaten, neither to Nefertiti, neither to Tutankhamun himself, the one, the only one, son of
This is a
Akhenaten.
photo for the tourists visiting
as
the
well.
site.
This is another place, we call it Tuna al-Jebel.
Yes.
In the Minya as
It's
well.
very famous.
Yeah, it's so famous.
Why is it famous, more known than Bani Hassan?
Bani Hassan, Tuna al-Jebel, and Amarna equal in the fame, especially different sites. Let's say Bani Hassan dated back to the Middle Kingdom.
Yes.
It's the oldest site there, Bani Hassan. And at that time, we can consider the local governors as pharaohs in their provinces or their cities. They did a kind of, not exactly what we call it independence, but it seems like was a kind of independence from the central government in, at that time was a place called Ethitawi, nearby Hnasia in Beni Suef. That local governors built their tombs, or actually it's cut in the rock in one of the cliffs there, And these tombs very, very important if you compare it with the other tombs that we have within Saqqara with what we call it mastabas. Because in these tombs we have some reliefs and some paintings talking about the daily life. I mean agriculture, work, manufacturing, artisans, fishing, hunting. This is very important because all what we have in the tombs in Valley of the Kings, for example, or in the temples, there are scenes talking about prayers and offerings, and I mean in general religious scenes. But in these tombs in Beni Hassan or like in the mastabas in Saqqara, scenes talking about the activities, the daily life activities and the daily life work. That's why it's very important we can guess from those reliefs or those paintings what kind of life, social life had passed. Even we are talking about the high dignitaries and the high officials, but of course we can see some, even you can see in one of the scenes, some people they are doing pedicure and manicure. It's something very important and very advanced at that time. You can see the hairdressers as well walk, and one of the musician was a blind one talking, playing something like the harp or musical instruments, and chanting and or singing. Also, we have the sports wrestling scenes. For example, in one of the tombs, it's called Khunum Hotep, we have more than 90 different positions of wrestling and practicing sports. A big wall of the tomb, the whole wall dedicated to these scenes. Also, we have the scenes that represent fishing and hunting and agricultural work. You can see those people working in the fields, and they have the sickle for the harvest of the wheat, and they are threshing with the fork. It's very important because those scenes, a little time ago, we can see it in the villages in Egypt actually. The people working and they are doing the same work exactly with the same manner or the same way that represented in these tombs. So it's very, very important. Tunnel El Jebel, it's another site, but it's more Greek-Roman, more Ptolemaic site. Because there we have a tomb dedicated to a very young lady called Isadora. And actually was a nice story behind this tomb. They said that she was fell in love with one wasn't equal. I mean, from little class, not high class as her.
Yes.
Her father didn't accept that.
Rejected.
Rejected that love. So she been swimming to get to cross the river Nile, and she died under the Nile water there, and they consider her as a martyr. That's why they built this tomb to honor her love and what was passed to her due to that very dramatic story of love. Another tomb there from the Ptolemaic time of one is called Butuziras. Badi Uzir or Bituziras. That tomb giving us a very nice scenes of the daily life, especially that famous scene of the wine making. We can see the people standing and pressing by their feet the grapes and the liquid collected in like a kind of big dishes. And then it's a very interesting scene there in Bani Uzir or Butuziras tomb. Also, there are some other scenes talking about the agricultural work and the farming animals and so on. Another thing was very, very important in Tun al Jebel. that the hypogeum. Hypogeum, it's a kind of underneath corridors cut in the rock and was dedicated to be as a tomb for that famous baboon. The baboon was the symbol of Tot. Tot was, or Tuhut, or Jehuti, as we call him in hieroglyphics, was represented in two forms. One form as an ibis bird, as the god of writing, because we know that type of birds, ibis and the heron, they always go to the land after the irrigation, and still the land in muddy. So when those birds walking above the muddy land, it looks like, with the bows making like a kind of inscriptions or graffitis. So the ancient, they been thinking what those birds are doing, they are writing down. So they got this symbol of a god of, or the symbol of writing as an ibis bird. The baboon, or the one of the monkeys, it's a very intelligent animal in his race. Look, between the animals, and always the baboon jump from a tree to another tree, especially with the sun rays in the morning. When the sun rises in the morning, the baboons start to jump from one tree to the other tree with screaming, and they making voices. The ancient believed that they are singing for the sunrise. That's why they employed them as a symbol of Tot, and the same time represent wisdom and blessing. So Tot, or Jehuti, had these two symbols as a god of writing, an ibis bird, and as a god of wisdom, as a baboon, or one of the race of the monkeys.
Yes.
That's why the hypogeum, or that place, was dedicated to Tot.
Yes. Mr. Taha, this visit by the German and the Austrian delegation to these sites in the Minya Governorate, how would this visit leave a good echo, and boost tourism in Egypt?
Of course, Minya suffered a lot, let's be honest, because during the 90s, due to some circumstances, was very few tourism in Minya. And when we started to get the tourism back with the beginning of the new century, very few as well, because as you know, the traveler or the holiday maker, he get like 1 week or 10 days, and they are always looking for that famous places, Giza pyramids, Saqqara, the museum here in Tahrir, and then Luxor and Aswan and Abu Simbel. So that places needs a lot of time. So to go to Minya, and we used to do what we call it bus tour, and that bus tour start in Cairo up to Aswan by bus, and it took like 10 days to get through all this. Not everybody who wants to do a holiday in Egypt had that enough time to do Minya as well.
The 10 days only for the pharaonic or the ancient Egyptians monuments?
For
for
the
all
classic program is 7 nights, or
Yes.
8 days, 7 nights. The classic program. The classic program include Giza, Saqqara, 1 day for.
And the historic Cairo is not included,
historic,
Alexandria.
No, in this 1 day we do the museum and the Islamic Cairo and Coptic Cairo.
Yes.
And the other day we do Giza pyramids and Saqqara. Then we travel to do Luxor and the Valley of the Kings.
Yes.
And then you stop in between Luxor and Aswan for Idfu and Kumumbu. And then when you arrive to Aswan, you need to do an overnight, because you need to do a long trip from Aswan to visit Abu Simbel.
Yes.
It's about 3 hours by bus from Aswan to Abu Simbel. 3 hours going up and then going back. So you need to be in the early morning with the sun rays to get to Abu Simbel easily.
Yes.
All these trips you can do it by plane. I mean, Abu Simbel you can visit it by bus or by plane. But even this is a classic program. But if you have more days, for example, if you want to, you will bus
For
4
14
nights in Cairo, for example.
Yes.
You can do instead of 4 nights in Cairo, 1 overnight in Minya, because Minya 1 day is not enough. 1 day is not enough.
Yes. It needs at least 2 days.
Well, yeah, when you arrive, for example, at the midday, and then you bus, and you can visit one site, and then you bus a night, and then the next day you
Yes.
can visit the 2 sites.
Yes.
That's the program you need to do.
I thank you very much for your time, for your valuable information, Mr. Said Ali Taha, historian and researcher. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for following me in this segment. I leave you with the rest of the segments of The Breakfast Show.